The concept for our trip was simple. Our two couples, one in North Carolina and the other in California, linked by a cousin in each, would travel to Scotland, a country where we have some documented ancestral ties. We wanted a taste of the land of whiskey and haggis at a price we could afford. The plan we devised was also simple. We would meet in Edinburgh and use that city and Glasgow as our base at either end of a 10-day trip. In the middle, we'd spend a day in the far northern Shetland Islands, home of the popular British TV police drama, using our cabins on the overnight ferry each way as our home for that excursion. Emily and I left a day early, thanks to a sweet deal on plane tickets that required us to fly to London via Copenhagen. Not long after we checked into our London hotel the next evening, Hank and Mary Wood took off from North Carolina on their overnight transatlantic flight, which would connect in London to their final flight to Edinburgh. On the second morning of our trip, Emily and I checked in at London King's Cross Station for our lunchtime departure on London Northeastern Railway's Azuma fast train to Edinburgh's Waverley Station. We had just unpacked at our Edinburgh hotel when Hank and Mary Wood's taxi arrived from the airport. Let the haggis banquet begin.
I'm going to have the fish and chips, and also I'm going to try this haggis
Haggis out of the starter portion?
I'm going to do the same as Hank. I'm going to have the haggis appetizer and the fish and chips main.
Beautiful. 4 fish and chips, 2 haggis towers, a glass of Sav, Guinness. Thank you, sir.
I'll have the same wine that she's having.
Have you ever eaten liver pudding?
He said it was
I may have.
like Jimmy Dean.
This is better.
Jimmy Dean
We're coming up with the name liver pudding
liver.
to make it.
It's hot, isn't it?
There's nothing objectionable about it, I'll say that.
St. Andrews is a short train ride from Edinburgh, an easy day trip we made to a place golfers know as the birthplace and shrine of their game. We paid homage to the old course. But we also took a walk through the University of St. Andrews, the third oldest university in the English-speaking world at age 611, and through the ruins of St. Andrew's Cathedral, built in the 12th century and in ruins since the 16th. It was the largest church ever built in Scotland. Most Americans, however, have probably seen St. Andrews in its starring role in the opening title sequence of the movie Chariots of Fire, where West Sands Beach, alongside the golf course, is a stand-in for Broadstairs Beach in England, where the British track team trained for the 1924 Paris Olympics. People have lived on this hilltop since the Iron Age, and the beginnings of Edinburgh Castle there are about 1,000 years old. 15,000 years ago, an Ice Age glacier was split in two by the extremely hard rock of this dead volcano. The glacier carved a mile-long ridge line from the hilltop that was revealed when it melted. Today, the Edinburgh Street that begins at the castle and runs along the ancient ridge to the Palace of Holyrood House at the bottom of the hill is known as the Royal Mile. It's the main drag of Scotland's capital city and the address of many of its most famous buildings. We began our 2-day exploration of Edinburgh within the walls of the castle. It holds a military garrison, the National War Memorial, an ancient banquet hall, and the Scottish crown, scepter, and sword of state. They are the nation's crown jewels, the honours of Scotland, which we saw but couldn't photograph. They are the oldest crown jewels in the United Kingdom. Aside from its value as a tourist attraction, the practical value of the castle today to the people of Edinburgh and the ships on the Firth of Forth is for the 105th Regiment Royal Artillery to let them know when it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, every day. It's 1 o'clock. At the bottom end of the Royal Mile stands the Palace of Holyrood House. Holyrood means Holy Cross in the Scots language, and has come to be the name of the neighborhood surrounding the palace. It began as a guest house adjacent to Holyrood Abbey, which was founded in 1128 on the order of Scotland's King David I. The abbey's ruins still stand today, and what was the guest house next door is now this palace. It's the residence of the British monarch, who is also the King or Queen of Scotland, when he or she is in Edinburgh on official business. Since he ascended the throne in 2022 after Queen Elizabeth II's death, Charles III has spent 1 week a year here at the beginning of summer. When the king is away, the palace is a tourist attraction and its grounds a public park. Across the street from the palace is this new and architecturally controversial building, which was completed in 2004. In 1997, Scottish nationalists won a referendum to regain some local political authority back from London. That power is wielded by a new Scottish Parliament in this building with 129 members in one house, as opposed to a House of Lords and House of Commons in the British Parliament. The British monarch, however, must still officially open the Scottish Parliament after a new one is elected every 4 years. That means someone has to fetch the Scottish crown, which is kept at the top of the hill in Edinburgh Castle, and bring it to Parliament so everything is done decently and in order. It so happens that the monarch has an army. This is how the crown was fetched when QE2 was running the show. On our last full day in Edinburgh, a Sunday, we decided to go to church. It was central to the Scottish heritage aspect of our trip. As American Presbyterians, we have religious ancestry in the Church of Scotland and its, and thus our, mother church, St. Giles Cathedral. St. Giles is 900 years old this year. For its first 436 years, it was a Catholic church. Then came the Protestant Reformation, and for the past 464 years, St. Giles has been Presbyterian. This statue of John Knox, elected by the congregation in 1560 as St. Giles' first Protestant minister, stands inside. He was adamant that Scotland have its own national church, separate from the Anglican Church of England. St. Giles is one of at least 3 Presbyterian churches that stand on the Royal Mile, and there are several others within a few blocks' walk. So for Presbyterians, Edinburgh is like a mini Rome, and St. Giles, officially the High Kirk, or Church, of Edinburgh, their counterpart to the Vatican's St. Peter's. As the High Kirk of the National Church, St. Giles is also the site of many royal ceremonies, such as the first memorial service for Queen Elizabeth, who died at the family's Balmoral estate in Scotland 2 years ago, and when the new king was presented with the Scottish crown. On our Sunday morning at St. Giles, the Reverend Sigrid Martin preached. Speaking with her after the service, we discovered one of those travel connections that makes the world seem smaller. Sigrid has visited North Carolina, where her sister, Dr. Ika Martin, is an academic advisor at UNC, where 2 of our travel group graduated. As we left the cathedral and re-entered the tourist world of the Royal Mile outside, we immediately encountered some of Scotland's other Sunday doings. It was the first Sunday of May, the opening day of a holiday weekend celebrating May Day, a day with multiple personalities. May Day opens the summer vacation season in Scotland and across Europe, but it's also the popular name for International Workers' Day, a counterpart of Labor Day celebrated in September in the United States and Canada. Later in the day, we visited the nearby harbor town of Leith to tour the Royal Yacht Britannia, which was built for Queen Elizabeth in 1954. The yacht, which is the size of a small cruise ship, had a crew of 271 naval officers and sailors, and was decommissioned in 1997 because of its financial burden on the British government. It was given to a newly created charitable trust to be maintained as a tourist attraction. During the 43 years the Britannia was at the Queen's disposal, it sailed more than 1 million nautical miles in multiple trips around the world. It was used for royal vacations and honeymoons, hosting presidents and other foreign heads of state, and occasionally for working trips, like evacuating refugees from civil wars and returning the last British governor from Hong Kong home after the colony's return to China. After 5 days in Edinburgh and St. Andrews, we headed north by train and then by an overnight ferry to the remote islands of Shetland, the northernmost region of Scotland and the entire United Kingdom. We celebrated Emily's birthday aboard the Northlink ferry MV Rossi. There's hardly a tree anywhere in windswept Shetland. Only 23,000 people live there, clustered on just 16 of the more than 100 islands in the archipelago. About a third of them live in the only borough, or town, which is Lerwick, the destination of our ferry from Aberdeen. We have no known roots in Shetland, nor do many Scots. This is what drew us to visit. Writer Anne Cleeve's murder mysteries set in Shetland were turned into a highly rated TV series by the BBC, which millions of Americans, including us, stream and binge watch. The series showcased the island's bleak beauty to the world, driving tourism into one of the top industries of an island economy once dominated by fishing, sheep, and North Sea oil. Half of Shetland's 200,000 annual visitors, nearly 9 times the number of residents, arrive by cruise ships like this one from Norway. The rest come by plane or Scottish ferries. D.I. Jimmy Perez and bleak beauty aside, one of the things we didn't appreciate about Shetland's settlement history before our trip was how it mirrors Scotland's multi-ethnic roots. Our visit to Jarlshof near Sombra was where we learned about that. Jarlshof comes from Old Norse words meaning the Earl's Mansion, which are the tall ruins here. The ruins dug into the ground had not been discovered when the mansion was built in the 16th century, after Scotland annexed the islands from Norway to settle an unpaid royal wedding dowry. The underground ruins were discovered after a storm in the 1800s, washed away part of the coast here and exposed ancient stone structures. Shortly after World War II, scientific excavation of the Jarlshof site revealed structures built by a series of civilizations dating back 4,500 years, when the Egyptians were building their pyramid. The earliest ruins go back to the ending of the Stone Age and include the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, through the Viking Age, which lasted from the 800s through the 1300s. Similar sites exist elsewhere in the Shetlands, the Orkney Islands, and on the Scottish mainland. Our guide, Grant Redfern, told us several times that while Scotland took over Shetland from Norway, there was never a treaty signed between the two countries. It was his way of reminding us that Shetlanders like to maintain a friendly degree of separation from the kilt-wearing folks with bagpipes to the south. But south to Glasgow, Scotland's largest city, was where we were headed when we reboarded the Rossie at the end of our day in the islands. The overnight ferry back to Aberdeen and then a ScotRail train brought us to Glasgow, Scotland's largest city. But on our first morning there, we boarded a tour bus for an all-day trip through the Scottish Highlands, the domain of Hattie Coos, hairy cows, feuds, and clans. Our route took us along the shore of Loch Lomond, the scene of that well-known song where one Scot takes the high road, the other the low road, and the latter gets back home to Scotland first. But the low road Scot sings that he will never see his true love again on Loch Lomond's bonny, bonny banks. It's a favorite at Scottish weddings. But the ballad is really about a 56-year stretch of Catholic-Protestant religious wars in the Highlands, and two soldiers being held prisoner after being captured in England, south of the Scottish border. One will be executed in the morning, the other will be freed, the legend says. They get to decide. In the tour guide's version, they were brothers, and the older one, whose wife is awaiting his return, poisons himself during the night because he's nearer the end of his life. He's the one who took the low road and spiritually returns to Scotland first. These wars were known as the Jacobite Risings, named for the supporters of deposed Catholic King James, Jacob in Latin, of Scotland and England, who wanted to restore him to the throne. This monument on the shore of Loch Shiel in Glenfinnan, the Finnan Valley in the Scots language, marks the spot where Bonnie Prince Charlie, James's grandson, raised his flag in 1745 to begin the last battle of the war, in which his army was defeated. Today, tourists on the Jacobite steam train cross this viaduct over the River Shiel at Glenfinnan and down the right side of the loch on their way to the coastal fishing village of Mallaig. Harry Potter movie fans know the Jacobite steam train as the Hogwarts Express and get this view filmed by Network Rail, owner of most of Britain's rail lines. Harry boarded his train at King's Cross Station in London, where Emily and I boarded our train to Scotland. But Harry boarded from the fictitious Platform 9 3/4, where he magically pushed his baggage cart through a solid brick wall. We were told the line for kids wanting to be photographed at the station's recreation of the movie location was an hour long when we were there. We had lunch at the Cabin Seafood Restaurant when we got to Malig. That's where Emily, who has Highland Macbeths in her family tree, met Arlene Macbeth, the chef's fiancée. Long-lost cousins? In hindsight, we did not give Glasgow enough time. But we made the most of our only full day in this city of commerce, art, and education, which led Scotland and Britain into a modern era. This was the warmest day of our entire trip, and a good part of Glasgow decided to spend a good part of their Friday enjoying it rather than working. Perhaps Catherine Cranston, the woman with the CoverGirl placement on Scotland's 20-pound banknote, best symbolizes how the elements of Glasgow's modern emergence produced and recognized social change. She has created a demand for just the right thing, in just the right way, at just the right price, the banknote inscription says of the 4 tea rooms Miss Kate opened in the city. We Americans think of afternoon tea as part of the British aristocracy's pinky finger fetish for fastidious ceremony. We had fun playing along. But Miss Cranston's tea rooms were about recognizing that ordinary people, particularly women, wanted appealing public places where they could gather and socialize over good food they could afford. The Glasgow architect she employed to design the tea rooms and their furnishings was Charles Rennie Mackintosh, who became famous in the Art Nouveau movement. The artists whose works she hung on the walls became known collectively as the Glasgow Boys, who painted the everyday lives of working people, rebelling against elite artists of the day. All of that is explored at the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum, adjacent to the campus of the University of Glasgow, which we visited earlier in the day. 18 years ago, nearly 9,000 Glaswegians donated to an extensive refurbishment of the museum and are listed alphabetically on its walls, without regard to the amount of their donations. James Watt, inventor of the steam engine that powered the Industrial Revolution, was a university employee. Adam Smith, who made economics an academic discipline and fathered capitalism, was one of its professors. We were there for the museum's daily half-hour organ recital. It all combined to make a pleasant ending for a trip to where some of our ancestors began their journey to the New World.